Welcome to our Ecological podcast. My name is Jan. I'm here with Theo, and this is our third episode on the unforeseen consequences global warming has.
That's right. Where shall we take off?
So I wanted to take off with the unexpected effects on weather, which obviously has a lot of things that it leads to, and that can also be effects on economy, which we will go over later. So regarding weather, I wanted to talk about the way that there is more extreme weather events, such as hurricanes, floodings, heat waves, and wildfires, as well as colder winters and warmer summers. And this is also found that in a study that human-caused climate change basically altered the likelihood of extreme weather events in 78% of cases that were studied.
Interesting.
So it also not only causes a lot of these events, which in the past couple of years have had large effects on many countries with several floodings and hurricanes. Not only do they cause these more often, but they're also expected to worsen the intensity and impact of some of these extreme weather events. And an example would be that sea level rise increases the impacts of coastal storms, and warming can place more stress on water supplies during droughts.
Right. Well, sea level is kind of a big part in the climate change. I
Yeah,
won't say it's a hidden consequence there, but I'd imagine that there's a lot of logistical problems that comes with the sea level rising that we not necessarily think about.
yeah. That's what I was sort of leading to. That it has quite a lot of, or it has quite a large variety of the effects it has. So yeah, that's it for the unexpected effects on weather. Do you have anything?
Yeah. So what I've got is about the carbon dioxide emission. Now, we've kind of established that carbon dioxide is kind of a catalyst more than the primary cause of the global house effects that caused. It's actually primarily done by the water vapor that's in our atmosphere that's retaining the heat within the earth, causing the rise in temperature.
Yeah.
And this cycle is kind of perpetual as it keeps the temperature warmer. There's naturally more water vapor, and therefore, so in that. But what carbon dioxide does is it does have the property of the greenhouse effect, but that addition kind of catalyzes this the perpetual cycle there. So, yeah, that's the primary problem that scientists or activists has on climate change, or like the factories that are making these pollutants. That it is taking a big toll on the whole cycle, and that's like the primary things that comes to mind about carbon dioxide. But another effect that it has that might be surprising, well, maybe not so, as you think about how oxygen is something we do need. The higher rise in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also means or a higher less oxygen we breathe in any given circumstance. And like that could really get high in situations like in cities, for example, down in the streets. It can go to like the level where it hinders like 20% of your cognition in your brain for the lack of oxygen you get. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of the same thing where well, it's a hazard that we've kept on what looking after since the whole thing that um that these gases settle below where children walk. Like that was a big thing in the late
yeah,
20th century, where oh no, the exhaust actually lingers where our kids' heads are. Anyway, but it's bad for the brain in general, and it does hinder our cognizance. And
yeah,
you can say that we're gonna become literally dumber and dumber as the carbon level rises. So that's an interesting thought to have.
yeah. And I actually had two things that actually lead on from this. One of them was more direct, and that was the effect on economy and the basically a loss of productivity. Because yeah, as you said, it does not have a very good effect on your brain. But also heating in general slows down productivity, such
Hmm.
as construction. But more so I want to talk about health. So not only does it have an effect like this, it can also lead. Well, it's not necessarily the carbon, but there's also worse allergies. But that's more due to the warming itself. So there's longer growing seasons and more favorable growing conditions, which basically causes a lot of pollen producing weeds to thrive, which many people are allergic to.
Mm.
And yeah, so basically just spring comes earlier and so does the pollen season, which then lasts longer, and they also grow faster um, and produce significantly greater pollen. Um, Another part that I wanted to talk about that is more surprising is that there's actually more ticks and Lyme disease. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so basically that's because warmer temperature increases tick reproduction. For example, I think in Canada it was 2 to 5 times as much, and up to twice as much in the United States compared to variations in other factors. Um, so yeah, it basically causes more ticks and thus more often Lyme disease. And obviously, there's also a factor of air pollution, what you were talking about previously.
Hmm. Right. Interesting. So you think that could it perhaps like increase the chances for outbreaks?
Um, yeah, in a way, yes, because as we can see, it's causing a lot more insects to thrive,
Hmm.
and in the past, there's been occurrences of them spreading diseases.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, you have things such as malaria and ticks, which are just two
Hmm.
examples.
Yeah, interesting thing because yeah, of course once winter becomes warm enough, mosquitoes and such who lays their eggs in the water actually survives, and
Yeah,
it can really pike in numbers right away.
yeah, because they basically just have a much longer period of
Hmm.
reproduction.
Yeah. Oh no.
Um, I wanted to talk about the effects on the economy.
Oh yeah, the economy.
So, yeah, basically, only recently, scientists and economists began understanding how serious the economic consequences of environmental changes,
Hmm.
especially if we fail to reduce global carbon emissions quickly. Um, and that's partly also because of damage to property and infrastructure, which is actually often caused by extreme weather events, which are more common now, as I was talking about earlier.
Mm.
Um, And there's also now there's going to be more often disruptions in daily life, which obviously can mean that there's a loss of work and school days,
Mm-hmm.
and it can also harm agriculture, transportation, um,
Mm-hmm.
tourism, and yeah, basically there's a lot of things that you could think about.
Yeah.
And also the extreme, again, back to the extreme weather events. Basically, you can have very severe rainfall and snowstorms,
Mm-hmm.
which actually have an unsurprisingly large effect on the economy, because they can cause power outages, delay air travel, cause traffic problems,
Mm-hmm.
and basically global or climate change will make it, and it's also currently making it harder for people to go about their daily business.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. We're gonna see a kind of hiccup in the economy, as you kind of described here, like the schools stuttering. Of course, that's the businesses with their plans. Yeah, definitely could imagine that. Hmm. And here, we'll have a guest coming in, who's part of our crew in this podcast, who has some things to say, I think.
Thank you for having me. So what I researched about was the impact of the food industry and the fashion industry, which I believe don't have been oversighted as industries that have impact of climate change. So while most people, they eat a lot of food, they don't really know the origins of the food, how it's made, and how it impacts the environment. Actually, the food industry actually accounts for a fourth of all GHG emissions, or greenhouse gases emissions, of the whole world, which, as anyone knows, harms the ozone layer extremely. Uh, and this is also a problem, like in the modern ways of farming and butchering and processing food. It's very industrial in a sense. They want to get the most meat and the most effectively and the fastest way possible, which doesn't really consider what impacts it has on the environment. So, yep. This is it's from sorry the farming industry creates greenhouse gases from the very start to the very end. So from land use change, the farming, the what they feed the animals, the processing, the transport, and the retail, and even the packaging. And as the steps proceed, the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced decrease, but it's still immense. Like, if we really consider, as well, there's this whole idea of veganism and people converting to diets that are quite unorthodox and not that traditional. It's actually very effective, such as that there is a major difference in how much each food produces emissions. As 1 kilogram of beef, possibly like 2 or 3 hamburgers, uh, produces 60 kilograms of greenhouse gases, while peas and like beans that have protein can also be as a substitute, only produce 1 kilogram of greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram.
Hmm. Quite interesting. Um, so like, what would you say would be like the primary thing that people should look out for that they otherwise wouldn't notice?
I guess, in a way, understand where your food is coming from. And I'm not saying that you should cancel all meat, because that is being part of culinary traditions and cultures for years and years on end. I'm not saying that you should stop eating meat all the way and become vegan, but I'm just saying understand what you're eating and what it impacts. So maybe reduce and change your diet, while many people are hesitant. And this is also affected by the demand for meat isn't going away at all. By the UN Food and Agriculture Organization's report in 2018, it is expected by 2050, 445 millions of tons of meat will be produced around the whole world. So, yep. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah, it's quite important to kind of notice the energy inefficiency of meat. If you know anything about bio, you can look up this energy flow, or was energy chain, of how energy transfers between the sun to the plants and to the herbivore that eats the plants. And actually, it's like a tenth, no, 1/100th of the energy that actually get metabolized, I think.
Yeah, there is the whole process of the carbon cycle. So from respiration to the atmospheric CO2, then being taken in later, and then going the whole process again. And also, addition to this whole changing of the diet, while some people still have this individual desire to consume meat, there's that satisfaction to it. There's also faking meat in a sense, such as such as the company called Impossible Foods, which tries to use full vegetarian or vegan ingredients to fake meat in a sense, give it its color, its distinct FEMA iron components, and which gives its distinct smell and flavor. So that's really it. Like, not many people know about this, and they don't really consider what they eat as a big factor to the whole impact of climate change. While it's more obvious that the industrial and pollution comes from factories and that kind of sort of establishments, but not really what they eat and where it comes from, as if it's not really said. And then on the contrary, well, it's a bit similar. So I also researched about the fashion industry. The fashion industry also accounts for a large part, but it's only a fifth of total greenhouse gas emissions, and it's also very wasteful, and it follows a similar industrial, I guess, perspective on creating the most clothes in the most fastest way possible and largest way possible to be the most efficient. So an example would be that per 1 kilogram of fabric, such as a t-shirt or just a shirt in general, uh, it's 23 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per 1 kilo, which includes the production of it, the manufacture, and the transportation, as many of the manufacturing locations are in developing countries, which is much cheaper to do, and they doesn't have to go through the similar legal processes they would have in developed countries. And this also impacts the residents in the areas where the manufacturers taken most places in, as it also pollutes the water they drink, in which many species and as well in the human individuals are dependent on, and this creates uh, accumulates diseases in those populations, which is extremely unethical. Also, another point is that 400% more carbon emissions would be less produced if we wear a garment 5 times instead of 50 times, which is somehow surprising that from a news report I read, most people on average in the United States, while it's not as relevant here, wear only a garment up to 8 times maximum and minimum 3 times, and then do not wear it again and throw it out or buy new clothing, which adds on top to the amount of clothing. So in fact, they don't wear as much clothes as they buy. And even in actual actions, the impact we have is quite limited. Like, I understand that many people are joining the movement of recycling fashion and using uh, environmental friendly materials of the clothes they wear, but only 15% of our clothing is actually recycled, and 5.2 overall waste is from our textiles. Yeah, so it really depends on how we act, not just a small movement of people around the world, but I think large companies should follow a more green perspective and attitude, even though some have, but not the most effective.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so definitely these casual things that's easy to change, substituting it for like other better ways isn't really too hard, considering that you're probably in a position to be able to do so. And it's not that bad, thinking about how we are scientifically improving on synthesizing these artificial things like veggie burgers. Hearing it might make you well get bad memories if you ever tried one. But recent days, we were able to synthesize like the substances that gives these meats their characteristic and implement those to like actual veggie burgers that not only is healthy but actually tastes like real meat. And I think it's a matter of commercializing it now and mass producing it. I think they've gone a long way to doing so, and if interested, you can check that out. And same goes to clothes. Like we're able to synthesize a lot through plastic and cotton. Well, that's a bit far ahead, but all of these things is just a little to what a little annoyance, I guess, to not consume, but not too far in the future, I bet we're going to be able to have actual alternatives that matches the actual products. So yeah, that will conclude our episode for today.
Thank you for listening, and hope you enjoyed.